Yeah. Welcome to session 3. We're continuing with switches and beginning a very important step with creating loops. And that's why we will create a new project, like the project from last week. I just have like this week, like the switches, but we will begin a new project from scratch. That's why I will make a new project here, project console application. Stuff which we have done before, I will always do it in a very fast way. Every input will be done in a very slow way. And save. I will using .NET Core 3.1, but of course you can always use .NET Core 6 or 5, doesn't matter. It's just important that you get used to use Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code or REPL.it. As I said, Visual Studio is the best program to code in Visual or in C#, so that's why I'm using it. But of course, you can use many different ways to program or implement your applications. We will start from scratch, and the main idea today is introducing loops. We have already introduced a very important loop, which was the do-while loop. And I was already telling you some stuff about go-tos and some other stuff. So our application today will be implementing a very easy menu, but also already with doing an application where we can average some stuff. So we want to compute the average of a certain amount of numbers. That's our goal today. So we want to create an application where we want to type in how many numbers do you have, and please, I want to calculate the average of these numbers. So in the beginning, I will tell my computer, please press 1. Welcome to my program. Welcome to my program. Press 1 for calculating the average, or press 2 for exit. Okay. Press 1 or press 2 for exit. As we know, the first step of our menu should always be a switch. Switch is widely used among all programming languages, well, except Python probably, but the rest is just using switches. Switches is just very important for everybody of us in the beginning. So we know, okay, if we want to give the user some usability, we should tell them, okay, press 1 for calculating the average of numbers, or press 2 for exit. The competence, the competence you learn today, you can use for many other scenarios, not because averaging some numbers is just useless crap. Who needs the average of numbers? I don't need it. So, but you can use it in many different scenarios. For instance, calculating the sum of something, calculating your health points in your computer game, or like the overall outcome of your beverages when you go to Burger King, when you buy something. So the first step, when we write console write line, we know we can illustrate this on the console, but we want to get the 1 or 2 in the exit. We want to get the 1 or 2 as a choice. So how do we do that in C#? We know in C# it is always very important to declare variables. Like in C++, in Java, in C, or in C#, it is very important to declare variables in the very beginning, because we know in the beginning we declare where we want to use our variables. So always very important. As we know, we can use integer for numbers and strings for words and characters for just only characters, or we can use doubles for numbers with a comma. So how do we get this? We know, as we can remember from last time, we can write choice equals convert to int 32 and console dot read line like this. As we know, console read line is a command which returns only a string, which returns a string, which means I get as a result, I get some word, I get a word, I get no characters, I get a word. So I want to convert this stuff to a number. So that's why I can use choice. Of course, we can, instead of using 1 or 2, we can create menus for, instead of writing 1, we can write menu for press W for blah and press E for something else, like in a computer game. But I will show this afterwards. In many programming languages, we begin with numbers, like in C# or in C++. So how can we create the menu? As we know from last time, we create a switch. Switch has the basic structure of this with curly brackets and normal brackets in the very beginning. The switch always takes as an argument, like the ingredient, which variable I'm using. For instance, I'm using choice. Choice should be always the one and only variable for our menu. So switch creates the menu depending on my variable choice. We want to be able to cope with all the different cases. So that's why we write, for instance, case 1, colon, and we create the basic structure of the switch. The basic structure of the switch should always look like case and break, case and break. Very important. That's the basic structure of our switch. Here we go. As you can see, case and break, case and break. We know, and in between the case and the break, here everything which is done, which is applied when pressing 1. Here everything is done when pressing 2. But what happens when we press 3, 4, 5? We should be able to create a default case. That's why it's always very important to create a default. Default means if I'm too stupid to press 1 or 2, a default will be called. I just try to format it that everybody sees the stuff. So in our scenario, like we had last time, that's like a summary from last time. We had like a menu. When I press 1, I get inside here. I press 2, I get inside here. I press 3, probably we said, okay, I can write console write line. Are you too stupid to press 1 or 2? Or I can write, please tell me your number again, or whatever. I can write whatever I want. Actually, please, I can be very polite today. Please tell me your choice again, or wrong choice or something, but just again. Of course, I can be a bit rude as well, but I try to be polite today as a programmer, not as a person, but as a programmer. Please tell me your choice again. Okay, please tell me your choice again, maybe. And how do we test our cases? At this step, we were already programming quite a lot. At this step, we should always test our stuff. As a software engineer or programmer, we always have to test stuff. Because I was just summarizing stuff from last week, that's why I was a bit faster, so I didn't test. But I normally would have tested it already, maybe twice or 3 times. So that's why testing is always very important. Otherwise, we don't know if all this stuff is working or not. So it looks like we have no errors at this time. But hopefully I will make some errors as well that we can see what happens. To test our cases in the very beginning, I will always use console write lines, because then I know this case is working. So probably it's always like a debug function, very easy way of debugging stuff. Console write line, case 1, maybe, whatever. I can write whatever I want. I just want to test if my case is really working, if it's jumping inside the cases. So that's why I am testing it. And I can always just recommend testing, writing, testing, writing. Even though if I don't test it, please do it. Make it better. Become a better programmer, become a better software engineer than I. Well, it's not very, very difficult, but I just try to be. Press 1, case 1. Okay, as you can see, it just works once, which is stupid, but it works already. So as a next step, we said, still in the summary phase, still said, we wanna just, when we press maybe 3 or maybe 2, we want to close the application. So we know, for instance, we can close the application with environment.exit 0. We got many questions last time. What's the 0? The 0 means exiting without any errors. I can type this in, but maybe if I type 1, I wanna repeat my calculating menu. I want to repeat my menu. And as we learned from last time, we learned 2 ways of doing it. The first way is like the easy way, and it's like the way we shouldn't do it, but sometimes it's very nice. In my opinion, it's a great way to do it, even though many programming languages say, okay, don't do it. But we begin with the go to again. Go to, maybe I call it menu. I can create menu. I can create go-tos wherever I want, in C#, in C++, in C, many other languages, but not in Python, not in Java. For a reason, because you should always write nice code. In my opinion, go-tos make some stuff in the very beginning more understandable. Of course, I understand if we shouldn't use it, but okay. That's the first thing. What happens if we use go-tos? Go-tos just means, as we know, jumps to the position, to my mark where I can create it. Just be advised that using menus like this and using the go-tos like this with semicolons. So that's the very easy way to use just repeating stuff. In the very beginning, I just tested with 1, 1, 1. It always repeats itself. But on the other side, if I use 2, it just quits my application. Go-to is the first way of creating something to repeat itself, but we learn something which is more powerful. Well, more powerful, probably the wrong word, but it's like, which is a very good way, a better way to do it, just better. Okay, how can we do it? And this is not a go-to, still in the summary. That's why I'm quite fast. What can we do in a better way, in a more advanced way to do it? And that's a do while. And a do while is a very important way of repeating stuff for most programming languages. I still don't understand why Python has no do while. I still don't understand. I don't get this point. They just have a while. But in my opinion, a do while and a for loop, those 3 loops should be included in all programming languages. I just don't understand why. But of course, you can implement it in Python as well. but I just don't understand why they didn't use it. So how do we do a do while? A do while means I wanna repeat this stuff as long as I say no more, and I wanna do it at least once. That's why a do while is very usable, because I always wanna compute my menu at least once. But then I can say, okay, piece off or whatever. I can say, yeah, I don't know more. But that's why I can use a do while. A do while should always begin where I wanna begin my menu. That's why I do it here. Do curly brackets, and the do should end. So I delete the second curly bracket. Be careful. I end the whole package, the whole block. I end the whole package here where the menu ends. My menu ends here. So I create at the very end another curly bracket. As you can see, Visual Studio makes it automatically. And at this point, I write do while. While means, okay, as long as my statement is not reached. In other words, I wanna do this stuff as long as I don't press, for instance, 2. So I can write while choice unequal 2, which means as long as my choice is not equal to. As long as this is not reached, I wanna repeat the whole stuff. I wanna repeat the complete stuff, which is very, very important for everybody of us. So please be careful with your curly brackets. Be careful where it ends. It ends where the menu ends, or it ends where you wanna end it. And it does repeat itself as long as this statement is not reached. So while choice is unequal to, the whole block will continue. So I can test it again. I can test this stuff again. Let's see what happens now. If something happened here, test it, testing it. What happens now? It happens that my block will repeat itself as long as I don't write 2. If I type in 2, the whole application will stop. This is kind of the summary from last week, where we continue now. The next step now, and now the whole pace, the whole velocity of my teaching will be slower, because now the new input begins. Okay. The first thing in our case is we wanna, as a first step, we wanna compute the average of 3 numbers. And if you understand what the average of 3 numbers is, you just look what I'm doing and then you try to program it. In my opinion, I would just wait and look what I'm doing. I want to create the average. I want to calculate the average of 3 numbers. Okay, so please just take it easy. We will, of course, do something more advanced in the very first step. I just want to show the overall development of loops. Why do we use it? And why do we need it? So the first step in our case 1 is that we want to calculate the average of 3 numbers. Okay, It's a very easy algorithm, but a very, very important to go on and continue. So the first step is I want to calculate the average of 3 numbers. So probably I would tell my computer, please give me the first number like this. And we know, okay, please give me a first number. We know, okay, I could create a variable number 1. I could create a variable number 1, which should be able to use all numbers. That's why I'm using comma numbers. That's why I'm using double. So I will create one here, which is called number 1. This step, as we know, is a declaration. Declaration means I only reserve the space in my memory. I only allocate, which is a very important word as a software engineer. I only allocate the space in my memory. It's called a declaration. Even if you don't understand why, or even if you think, okay, so what the heck, why is this important? This word is important. Declaration is important. Okay, I only declare a variable. First step. Here we also have a declaration. So I say that number 1, maybe I just want to have 3 numbers where I can compute the average. I will compute 3 numbers. As I said, this is the most stupid way of calculating the average. I just want to show the development, the transition from stupid development to a bit more advanced development, and with why do we use loops. I can use those 3 numbers now. Give me the first number. Here we go. And I can write maybe number 1 is convert to double. Here we go. It understands. Visual Studio is so intelligent. It understands automatically why do we use it. Console prompt read line. Please be advised again that we have to use convert in this case. Read line needs some parentheses like this. I will just copy and paste the whole crap. So copy and paste it because I want to calculate the average of 3 numbers. So that's why I want to use it for the second. Please give me the second number. Second number, number 2, and third number. Please give me the third number. So, and please don't think, okay, this is the very intelligent way. I just want to show some stuff. I just want to show why do we use loops. Okay, please give me the third number, first number, second number. What's happening now? What's happening now? If I use my very intelligent program now, it's okay. Welcome to my program. Please give me the first number, 34, second number, 56, and third number, 77. Here we go. Okay, nothing happened so far, but 34 is stored into number 1. 56 is stored into number 2, and 77 is stored into number 3. But I want to calculate the average of all those 3 numbers. So it's very important that we create another variable, which probably has the name A or average, or I will call it average. I will call it average. I will call this variable average because we wanna calculate the average. And this is not by far very, very, very difficult. but we know, okay, the average of 3 numbers should be easy for nearly everybody. If we have some problems here, please go back to primary school. You probably learn it there. Okay, we have like number 1 plus number 2 plus number 3. Please use brackets here, divided by 3. I have the average here. And if I compute this wonderful program, I don't see any output. But we know we always have to use console write line. We have to use console write line in order to be able to print out or to output our overall output, which is which I could use like average. We know. I just want to test it. Here we go. Before we begin formatting it, testing this stuff. Just having a sip of coffee. 1, first number, 44, 55, 106. And here's the okay, please give me the first number, blah, 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 68.33. We know already from last time we could use math.round to round it, but we don't do it now. We can do it afterwards. So, but we wanna, of course, we wanna format it in a better way. Probably we wanna say the average of those 3 numbers is, and in C# we use a plus, like in Python, like in Java, yeah, and like in other languages, not in C++, but like in Python you can use it as well. Even though some people don't use it, they always use F strings, but I use plus in Python as well. You can use plus to format it in a better way, of course, and we still know, even if I want to format it afterwards again, we can always use like blah blah. I can write the average is blah 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 without rounding. I just want to use some words at the end that we can see how we use it in C#. In Python would be slightly different, but not much different. We just use 1 plus here, but in most languages it's kind of the same. So what happens now is we have like a formatting of our stuff. Hopefully we make some mistakes again. Please give me the first number, 44, 22, 77. What the heck? The average of those 3 numbers is 47.66 without round. Terrible English, but okay, doesn't matter. Of course, as we know from last week, we can use math.round, but we don't do it now because we want to get you some new theories, some new knowledge. That's why I'm closing this stuff. So the first reason we want to change it, we want to optimize this crap is because what happens if we don't have 3 numbers? What happens if we have 100 numbers? I don't want to sit here and copy this stuff all night long. That's just stupid. That's why we need loops in programming languages. That's why we need loops to make stuff easier for us. So in our way, we want to create something which makes it possible to calculate the average of 10 numbers, of 20 numbers, of 22 numbers, of 100 numbers. But we want to tell our computer how many numbers we want to have. So that's why this stuff is stupid. It's stupid. I don't delete it now because we want to change it. We want to change it to something more beautiful and to something more making more use like this. So welcome to my program. Please calculate the average of 2 of 1. The first thing is we want to optimize it, and to calculating still the average of 3 numbers, but to make it already easier for the computer. The first step is now we compute the average of 3 numbers, and we want to show what's the usage of loops. That's the first step. So what we do is, I just used it somewhere, just don't use it. I uncomment it because I don't want to use it right now, but probably I want to use it kind of, maybe a bit changed afterwards. That's why as a first step, we want to calculate the average of 3 numbers, exactly the same, but with loops. So what's the difference? As we know, we already have used one loop. That's the do-while loop. The do-while loop computes stuff as long as I want and at least once. The second loop, and in my opinion, the most important loop by far, is the for loop. The for loop is computed very, very similar in all programming languages except Python, or like some difference, well, like in JavaScript, different as well. But in all programming languages, except some exceptions, we have a very important loop, which is computed as many times as I know from before. I know I want to repeat some stuff 3 times. I want to repeat and call my number and get my number 3 times from before. Because in comparison, do while is done as long as I want and I can choose it. A for loop, very important, is done as I know how many times it will be computed from before. I really have to state it, how many times. Very important example, if I have like many people in this room, I know from before how many people will be in this room. I will calculate the average of some marks from before. If I tell my computer, I have 20 numbers, I know I will calculate the average from 20 numbers. So that's why we use for loops. For loops, please, very important, look kind of the same for nearly all programming languages. And the basic structure of a for loop looks like this. For, parentheses, like brackets, and curly brackets, curly brackets. That's the basic structure of a for loop. For loop is used in this case to ask me for the number and to save it into my memory. That's the for loop. A for loop normally always has a variable which is used to count. And of course, I can create a variable which is a counter. I can call it integer counter. Why integer? Because integer is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's why integer. Because counting variables are so popular in all programming languages, even in Python, we always use a variable which has the name I. I always means it's a counter. So if you see somewhere in a programming language an I, it will be, it should be a counter. Of course, you can use I for different stuff, but it should always use I as a counter. Of course, I can use the variable counter, of course, but if you program somewhere, you will always use I. Okay. A for loop has always three different sections. A for loop has always 3 different sections. The first section is, where do we begin to count? Where do we begin to count? And that's why I make a comment to make stuff easier. The first section is where do we begin to count? That's the first section. The for loop has 3 sections. The first section is where do we begin to count? In most scenarios in programming, in most, not in all of them, in most of them, a programmer, a computer scientist always begins with 0 to count. So that's why the first section tells me where to count. So in most scenarios, I will begin with 0. In our world, we mostly begin with 1 to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But as a programmer, and it has many reasons, which we will learn afterwards, as a programmer, in most cases, not in all cases, in most cases, it is advised to begin with 0. The second section is divided by a semicolon. The second section is how long do we want to count? How long do we want to count? That's the second section. How long do we want to count? The second section means how long are we counting? I'm sure there are different explanations, but it's like my explanation. The second section is how long do we want to count? I want to count as long as, that's in the beginning the most difficult way to understand, as I is less than 3. That's the second section. I will explain when we have explained the third section. The third section, which makes a lot of sense, is how fast are we counting? How fast are we counting? Third is how fast are we iterating? Some people are also using the word iterating. Are we counting up or down? Counting, which means if I'm counting up, if I'm iterating up, I will want to have like 1 or 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I'm counting down, I will have like 10, 9, 8, and so on. Of course, it's very important to understand. I can, in most cases, I will count like by 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. But also it happens that I can count by 5, by 10, by 20, like 20, 25, 30, and so on. So of course, there are many ways of counting, but in most cases, and especially in the very beginning, please always count by 1. Because we use counting by 1 as so much and so often in programming languages, you can always use a very short abbreviation for counting, which is like I++. Plus plus means please count it always, like iterate it always by 1. That's I++. Of course, there is always the question like what's going on when you go down. Counting down means I minus minus. I++ means counting up. Okay. A for loop means, okay, in this scenario means please do this stuff 3 times. Please do this stuff 3 times. To test my for loop, I will write console, write line, and I will just test it. So I will just write some stupid crap and I will see what happens. If I check what happens now, it will be calculated 3 times. As I can see, I will type 1, test, test, test. So I can see if I use a for loop here, this which is inside the for loop will be calculated 3 times. So what's happening now? In the very beginning, I is 0. It jumps into here. It computes the command here. Then it checks, is I still less than 3? If I is 0, yeah, I am less than 3 because 0 is less than 3. As a next step, I will be iterated by 1. So I is 1. It jumps up again, does the stuff in the middle, and afterwards it controls, is I still less than 3? I is 1. Yes, of course, it's less than 1. So it will be jumping up again and iterated by 1 again. So it just does it until I is 2. Because if I is 2, 2 is less than 3. And then it checks again as long as I is less than 3. Because as a next step, I would be 3. And 3 is not less than 3. So it jumps out. I is in the beginning 0, then it's 1, then it's 2. So it will compute 3 times. Very important in the beginning, many people think it will be computed until I is 3, but it will stop by 2. So the last value of I is 2, not 3. Because if we begin counting by 0, then the first time will be 0, the second will be 1, and the third time will be 2. Very important. Very important. This is exactly the same code in Java, in C++, in C, in many other languages. Exactly the same code. Nearly all, or kind of all programming, or kind of all applications need a for loop. So as a first step. So, but we don't want to compute 3 times test. That's just useless. We want to calculate the average of 3 numbers. So what do we want to repeat? We have to fill the for loop with stuff we want to repeat. So I can repeat 3 times something. What's usable in our application is give me the number, probably not the first number, but give me a number and save it. Because as we know from before, the step before told us we want to ask for a number and then we want to read a number. So as a next step, I just copy this stuff from before and please give me the first number. This will always ask me for the first number, which is just useless again. So I will probably change it to please give me a number. Probably. And instead of using number 1, because this will always be overwritten, I will use, and I will delete the declarations here. I will use, instead of using number 1, I will use number. I will use number. Why do I do that? Because if I simulate it, if I show my application now to you, I can use 1. Please give me a number, 55. Please give me a number, 66. Please give me a number, 77. But what happens now is that this number in console readline convert to double is always stored into the same space, into the same area of memory, always. So it means my value of number is always overwritten, always, which is by far still not the average of 3 numbers. It's asking me now 3 numbers. It's asking me now for 3 numbers, but I want to calculate the average of 3 numbers. So this means I have to think of an algorithm how to create or how to calculate the average. So a very important step now is if I use this value over and over again and add it together, I get the sum. I get the sum of those three numbers. So if I could create something adding all those three numbers together, I could have a sum. So as a next step, I create a variable. I declare a variable called sum. Sum means the sum of all numbers. And a very important step, I can use sum adding all those numbers. Many people in the very beginning, they write something like sum is equals number. But that's just useless. Again, why is this useless? Because sum would always be overwritten. Sum would always be overwritten by the actual value sum, always. But in all programming languages, we have an operator which helps us to add numbers to a bigger sum, which can be very important, not just for averaging numbers, no, just for many other things. And that's an operator which is very, very, very useful. And that's the operator plus equals. Plus equals means please take the actual value of number and store it into the variable number, sum, sorry. Take the actual value number and store it into my container sum. So every time I get a new overwritten value from number, this will be stored into sum. Visual Studio, I don't know what's Visual Studio Code saying, but Visual Studio tells me an error. If I remember when I was a student, long time ago, far a galaxy, far away, I didn't get an error here. But Visual Studio is very strict. Visual Studio tells me, Jesus Christ, are you from Austria or are you stupid? I don't know. You make some errors. You are really stupid. You have to fix something. But I don't see an error here. But it's very important to understand. Most programming languages now tell me, please, where does your sum begin? In our head, the sum always begins with 0 because in the beginning we have no values. But for computer, if we tell our computer we have a double sum, it could begin in a memory somewhere. It could begin somewhere. So it's very advised, very important that we begin our sum like in our head. We begin it with 0. And this step, as a first step, it's called definition. This is a definition because we define a value to sum. On the other side, declaration. But it's also, in addition, not only a definition, it's called initialization. I'm always stupid. I'm sorry. I'm really dyslexic. So there's a L too much. To the item initialization. Okay. Still terrible. Yeah, it's a terrible word. Terrible word for dyslexic people. It's terrible. So definition, initialization. So please be advised, in many occasions, you need to initialize a value. And it's very important that you understand, if you set a variable to a value, it's called definition. If you just declare the value somewhere, it's a declaration. In some programming languages, like in Python, you don't have to declare. It will be declared automatically. But in most programming languages, it's very important that you have an understanding of declarations and definitions. Otherwise, you screw up the whole application and your boss will fire you. I don't know, but it's very important, really. I can tell you many stupid stories about it, but okay. The cool thing is, always don't forget it. Plus equal means take the actual value and add it to my sum. Because some people, when they use console just for testing purposes, write line sum. What happens to my sum? Just show to simulate what happens to my sum if I use this. And I will just use some simple numbers. I will use 10. The sum will be 10. I will use 20. The sum will be 30. I will use 40. The sum will be 70. So if I just compute and output the sum, which is just useless here, but okay, I wanted just to use it as a debugging, as a testing stuff. The sum will be computed. So plus equals is very important. Of course, there's minus equals and multiplied equals, whatever. But right now, and in most occasions, we need plus equals. So as a next step, we still haven't computed the average and we have 9 minutes. So the last steps are very easy. After the for loop, what means here is after the for loop, not here. Here is after the for loop, I have the complete sum. So sum divided by 3 is the average. So I have to just store it in my variable. Average is equal sum. My average is equal sum divided by 3. That's the average. And of course, if I wanna compute it, if I wanna output it again, I wanna write average, or I can write, of course, the average of the script of these numbers, blah blah, plus average. Of course, I can round it like we learned from last time. Of course, I can make some stuff. That's the next step, where we already included a loop. I can show the result. Hopefully it's working. And hopefully sometimes I should make some mistakes again, that you can see what's not working. 10, 20, 30. Average of these numbers is 20. Hopefully that's right. 60, 70. What? Okay. I was puzzled.
Something else we can do, since we already declared our counter outside the for loop, we can divide by the counter instead of
yeah. That's the next step. Okay. Perfect. As you can see, that's like, okay, that's working now for 3 numbers. But that's the cool advantage now, because we can see, yeah, what's the heck to use 3 numbers? The cool thing now is to ask for how many numbers we want to have. We can ask for how many numbers we have, and we know, like, if you can use I here somewhere, you can also use this information as a wiser step. So the next step is we want to compute the average, not just 3 numbers. We want to compute the average of an arbitrary amount of numbers. And how can we do that? How can we do it? Of course, we will copy this crap here and just use it here. And I want to have a question of how many numbers do you want to compute? How many numbers do we have? How many numbers do you have? Or do we want to have to compute the average? I just copied. And instead of using this, I will create a new variable, integer, amount. In German, I would use Anzahl in German. In English, I could say numbers, but I will prefer to use amount. As a programmer, you probably would use n, because n is always, like in mathematics, the amount. But I will use not Anzahl, I will use Anzahl like in German. I will use, because we always program in English, I will use amount. So the cool thing is here now, as a very easy step, I can use amount as a first step. I want to ask, how many numbers do you want to compute the average of how many numbers? Because just 3 numbers is just crap. I want to have 100 numbers. I want to have 20 numbers. I want to have 17 numbers, whatsoever. And the greatest advantage and the biggest advantage, of course, is if we use for loops now instead of using the for loop for 3 numbers. The only thing we have to change is, instead of writing 3, we write amount. Because the for loop does stuff as long as I is less than amount. And if we begin with 0 and we have 10, it stops by 9. If we have 100, it stops by 99. If it is 3, it stops by 2. And we have already our block. And the only thing, and perfectly timing, the only thing we have to change here, instead of average is sum divided by 3, divided by blah, divided by, we don't have to think about this information anymore. We can use the variable amount. And the first algorithm, because everybody is talking about algorithms all the time, that's like a very, very popular and very wide, well-known algorithm. And one of the first algorithms you should learn as a computer scientist is how to compute the average. Because if you really use your brains here, you can use the average now for an arbitrary amount of numbers. Here you go. And if we test it now, hopefully I make some mistakes now. If we test it now, here we go. 1, how many numbers do you have? I have 3 numbers like before. I tested 20, 44, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but I want to do it again. And I have 4 numbers now. And 3, 4, 5, 6. Here we go. So I can test it. I can change it. And I can use it for different amount of numbers. So perfectly on timing, introduction to for loops. For loops, switches, ifs, we have to use them all the time. And I understand some people have difficulties in the very beginning to understand loops. So please be advised to just test it. Use console write lines all the time. I will stop the recording now, and I'm open for all your questions. Please use it all the time. Please test it all the time. Thanks for today. And please ask me now as much as possible.